Grasping pervasion in Apoha theory, Dignāga and Kumārila. K. Kataoka. 1. Grasping pervasion in Apoha theory. Dignāga argues that the process of understanding word meanings is the same as logical inference, PS 5:1. In other words, he denies that language is a separate means of knowledge and considers that the word cow is nothing more than a logical reason, just like smoke. Language is a means of inference. This claim implies that the structure of understanding word meanings is the same as the structure of inference. That is, the relationship we see between smoke and fire, exclusion of non-fire, can also be applied to the word cow and the cow it directly indicates, exclusion of non-cow. This parallel structure with inference should also apply to grasping pervasion. To infer the hidden fire on a mountain from the rising smoke, we must first have a prior understanding of the pervasion relationship, that wherever there's smoke, there must be fire, that fire pervades all places where smoke exists. This is traditionally called pervasion grasping, vyaptigraha, the understanding of general laws. Just as smoke is pervaded by fire, the word cow is pervaded by cow. In other words, the word cow is necessarily applied to cows. Using the word only, we can say that just as smoke exists only where there is fire, the word cow is applied only to cows. So what position did Dignāga take regarding the method of grasping pervasion? And what kind of position was he considered to hold? This paper tackles this problem using Kumārila's criticism of Dignāga as the main source material. 2. Kumārila's criticism of Dignāga. While criticizing Dignāga's Apoha theory, Kumārila discusses the method of grasping pervasion in Apoha. First, in V. Apoha 73-74, he shows that in the Apoha theory, it is impossible to use positive concomitants, and vaya, as a method of grasping pervasion. This cuts off the path of establishing pervasive relationships through positive concomitants. Therefore, the only remaining method is grasping pervasion through negative concomitants, via tarika. In the following V. Apoha 75, Kumārila shows that it is impossible to grasp pervasive relationships through negative concomitants alone. Moreover, just not having been seen cannot establish that both, the reason/word, make something understood, because since they have not been seen in absolutely everything, nothing remains to be made understood. The content of negative concomitants is that just as there was no smoke where there was no fire, the word cow was never applied to anything other than cows. Specifically, this is the non-experience of counterexamples, that the reason, smoke, has never been seen in dissimilar examples, like lakes where fire is known to be absent. Applied to Apoha, this is the non-experience of ever seeing the word cow applied to anything other than cows. Against this negative concomitance theory based on non-experience, Kumārila points out that merely not having seen something cannot establish pervasion grasping, and therefore inference through words/reasons cannot be established. 75 ab. Why? Kumārila gives the reason, because words/reasons have not been seen in absolutely everything, sarvatriva hayadaft. His point is this: what Dignāga intended by not having been seen was never having seen the word cow apply to anything other than cows. But if we rely only on negative concomitants, Kumārila points out that we should actually never have seen the word cow apply to cows either. That is, Kumārila says that the application of words has not been seen in everything, both non-cows and cows. 75 candilas. The path of positive concomitants experiencing the word cow being applied to cows has already been rejected in the preceding passage, 73-74. Therefore, here we must establish pervasive relationships through negative concomitants alone. However, as long as we follow only negative concomitants, we cannot experience the word cow being applied to cows. Just as we have never seen cow applied to anything other than cows, it would also be true that we have never seen cow applied to cows when following only negative concomitants. If we need to experience the word cow being applied to cows, this would mean admitting that positive concomitants is essential for grasping pervasive relationships. 3. Hempel's Raven argument. Kumārila's argument can be rephrased using Hempel's Raven argument as follows: to prove the law all ravens are black, if something is a raven, then it is necessarily black, even if we point to everything non-black in the world one by one saying this is not a raven, this is not a raven, repeatedly confirming negative concomitants, or even if non-experience of counterexamples continues, never seeing something that is not black but is a raven, we cannot derive the law all ravens are black. This is because if we rely only on negative concomitants, we have never experienced anything being called a raven, not just non-black things, but black things as well. This becomes clear if we take an example where positive concomitants doesn't exist. The proposition all Martians have 8 legs is a law that cannot be verified through positive concomitants. Therefore, we can only verify it through negative concomitants, by accumulating negative concomitances like things without 8 legs were not Martians. However, no matter how much we confirm that things without 8 legs are not Martians, or even if we have never seen counterexamples of things without 8 legs being Martians, we cannot conclude all Martians have 8 legs. As Kumārila points out, we have never experienced 8-legged things being Martians either. As long as we use negative concomitants, neither things without 8 legs nor things with 8 legs have ever been seen to be Martians. This Martian example is the same as the Apoha example, where laws should be established through negative concomitants alone without positive concomitants. Without positive experience, we cannot derive pervasive relationships through mere non-experience. As Kumārila points out, in absolutely everything, that is, in both similar and dissimilar examples, words/reasons have not been seen. As Kumārila says, nothing remains to be made understood, pratīyanvayate, positive laws cannot be established just because something hasn't been seen before, so conclusions like, Martians, have 8 legs, or, the word cow, refers to cows, exclusion of non-cows, cannot be derived. 4. Dignāga's own statements. Dignāga doesn't completely reject positive concomitants. In PS 5:34 ABC, he mentions that the word cow has never been seen applied to horses etc., and that he has seen the word cow applied to some cows. However, Dignāga's intention is that only negative concomitants contributes to pervasion grasping. This becomes clear from the subsequent text, autocommentary. There, he states the impossibility of establishing pervasive relationships over all similar examples, because similar examples are countless. Therefore, in establishing pervasive relationships across all cases, we must rely only on negative concomitants. In the following explanation, Dignāga argues that even though dissimilar examples are countless, it is possible to establish pervasive relationships. This is because the word cow has never been seen apply to anything other than cows. Presumably, Dignāga's intention is that such cases have never been seen not just in one's own experience but socially including others' experiences, thus exhausting countless cases. That Dignāga doesn't acknowledge positive concomitants as contributing to pervasion grasping is also clear from the following sentence, where he points out the fault of relying on positive concomitants. In reality, from the word tree, we understand not just the possibility of a iap tree but also a palasa tree, that is, we have doubt about whether it might be a iap tree or a palasa tree. However, if we repeatedly experience the word tree being positively applied to iap trees, etc., instead of doubt like iap tree or palasa tree, we would have definitive knowledge like iap tree and palasa tree. Dignāga's argument here is clearly aimed at denying that positive concomitants contributes to pervasion grasping. Finally, Dignāga concludes, therefore, inference exists only through negative concomitants. The use of only, eva, here shows that he acknowledges only negative concomitants as a means of pervasion grasping. Thus, Kumārila's understanding of Dignāga as holding the negative concomitants theory can be sufficiently confirmed from Dignāga's Sanskrit original text, reconstruction. 5. Conclusion. No matter how many cases we confirm of things without 8 legs were not Martians, we cannot derive the law all Martians have 8 legs. Similarly, no matter how much we accumulate negative concomitances like things that are not cows were never called cow, or however much non-experience of counterexamples continues, things that are not cows were never called cow, we cannot acquire the pervasive relationship all cow words refer to cows. This is because if we don't acknowledge positive concomitants and rely only on negative concomitants, we should never have experienced cows being called cow either. In Kumārila's argument, Dignāga is regarded as a theorist who believes pervasive relationships can be established through negative concomitants alone. Indeed, Dignāga explicitly states, inference exists only through negative concomitants. Dignāga did not acknowledge that positive concomitants contributes to pervasion grasping. The reason because it is a Martian in the law. If something is a Martian, then it is necessarily 8-legged would be classified by Dignāga as an uncommon, inconclusive reason, astronautica, a faulty reason because similar examples don't exist. Although Dignāga didn't acknowledge the role of positive concomitants in pervasion grasping, he nevertheless thought there should be at least one case of positive concomitants. This was presumably to exclude exceptional cases like uncommon, inconclusive reasons. However, as already stated, Dignāga's consistent claim was that positive concomitants plays no essential role in pervasion grasping. The appropriate understanding is that positive concomitants' role in Dignāga's system was to eliminate uncommon, inconclusive reasons. Katsura, 1998, 278, who discusses Hempel's raven, states, in Japanese, that Adiotakara argues that inductive reasoning can be valid even without positive instances, but it is Dignāga's position that inductive reasoning cannot be valid with only negative instances and no positive ones. That is correct. This, in turn, might be considered one response to the paradox of Hempel's raven, but in doing so, he emphasizes that Dignāga considered positive concomitants, and vaya, to be essential. However, as we have already seen, and as can also be confirmed from Kumaarila's criticism of Dignāga, what Dignāga emphasized was, rather, the position that inductive reasoning can be established on the basis of negative instances alone, to use Katsura's own terminology. As stated earlier, Dignāga did consider experience of at least one case of positive concomitance to be necessary, but not in order to establish the pervasion-vyapti relation. Rather, it was to eliminate the problematic pseudoprobans, astronyktica, i.e., reasons with no similar cases. The assertion that inductive reasoning cannot be established with only negative examples is precisely the criticism that Kumārila directed at Dignāga. It is not a position that Dignāga himself actively advocated. That the pervasion relation can be established solely through negative concomitance lies at the heart of Dignāga's negative semantics, Apoha theory, and it is precisely this core that Kumārila attacks. Moreover, Dignāga held that the pseudoprobans rvatva, audibility, which has no positive concomitance, nevertheless possesses negative concomitance, and therefore satisfies the condition of pervasion. Thus, if left unaddressed, it could erroneously be considered a valid reason. This also attests to the fact that Dignāga regarded negative concomitance as the determinant of pervasion. Therefore, for Dignāga, it was necessary to eliminate pseudoprobans separately, specifically on the grounds that they lack positive concomitance. However, he did not believe that positive concomitance is what establishes the pervasion relation.